This is Dear Work, the podcast that's part breakup letter to outdated workplaces and part love letter to what work could be. My name is Matthew Cameron, and back in 2019, I hit rock bottom. I almost took my own life, and well, work had a lot to do with it. It flipped my entire perspective of what work should be, because let's face it, right now, both sides are losing. People are continuing to burn out, while companies are throwing money at solutions that don't work. And well, it's just broken. Let's get to work.
Christo, so glad to have you here on the Dear Work podcast. It's really lovely to have you here. I feel like we're going to have a great conversation. You're a passionate advocate for suicide prevention and human connection. You've got a background as a airline pilot, the black box investigator, and listening volunteer, and you're on a mission to help people see things from a different perspective, empowering workplaces to have real transformative conversations. So tell me your story. How have you gone from, that airline pilot to delivering mental health and suicide prevention training programs?
If you'd asked me that question a wee while ago, Matt, I would have laughed in your face. That's ridiculous. I was always of the mindset that mental health was, I coined this phrase, yoga and yoga, Pilates and lattes. And someone told me the other day, posters and coasters, that when there's a sort of wellbeing push in an organization, that everyone gets a coaster for their coffee. They get a coaster and a poster goes up and saying, hey, we're doing some wonderful things for you. And I just never really bought into that. I never thought that mental ill health would happen to me. I'm the youngest of four boys. I was sent to boarding school at the age of 12. I was basically told we don't talk about what goes on in here. If you've got a problem, you put it under the carpet and it will sort itself out with the weight of the carpet. Any photo you see from me as a kid, if there are any photos, I'm always holding something that's flying. I think the first photo of me is me with a kite line in my hand, and it was a kite that I'd flown into some telephone wires. And it's like I was always destined to fly planes. That's what I'd always wanted to do. I remember threatening to leave school for the sixth form and being like, yeah, I'm going to join the Air Force. And my parents, no, that's not happening. And they're like, you need an education. So okay. So I got a degree, came out to Edinburgh. That's how we met. I'm up here. I've been up here, despite the English accent, I've been up here for just coming up 24 years now. And whilst I was at university, I joined what's known as the University Air Squadron. So basically the lead-in for the Air Force. And I actually found out I was quite good at flying. So I got this real passion for aerobatics and these exhilarating things. And then kind of indoctrinated into the Air Force, where it's very male dominated. You don't talk about stuff. You're institutionalized to deal with things in a certain way. You never show emotion. You never ask for the instructions for the IKEA flat pack furniture. None of that. And life's pretty good. Training to be a fast jet pilot. Turns out I wasn't very good at that, and my backside was behind the aircraft rather than ahead of it. So I became a commercial pilot. I worked as a commercial pilot, as a training captain, teaching people how to fly in and out of weird and wonderful places around Europe. And part of my role there was in the safety department, working with the airline to try and find out why people do the things they do. And when we lock that flight deck door, why those behaviors that manifest themselves in the front of the aircraft, why they happen. So I was looking at all these data from these black boxes, and just being a bit, well, we can create a simulation, but it doesn't show the human impact of what's going on and why those things happen. Why I parked an aircraft on the wrong stand in London Heathrow and apparently it cost £32,000. Why did I do that? Imagine if that incident had happened in the air and I'd, done something differently. I think we learned in the 1970s in aviation that we can't just talk about the safety, we've got to talk about health. And if we're going to put people in control of very expensive, highly automated pieces of equipment, we've got to make sure they're in the best space to do that. So that was going on. Life was really good. We just had our fourth baby. Life was really awesome. And I kind of knew where I was going, and then you can hear the little crash, can't you? Something happened, and then a life-changing redundancy, as we now talk about it, and took me to a place where I did experience mental ill health, and it did become a real thing for me, but I couldn't understand what was going on. The dodgy beard that I grew, the hiding away in the family bathroom, and the relationship I developed with alcohol, it was the only way I knew to numb the pain, to not feel those things, because I'd always been taught, well, we put on a brave face, and I got to a place where I stopped seeing hope, and I'd never experienced anything like that before. For me, when we talk about suicide prevention, there are 5 really common factors why someone might go on that journey. And my identity, and I know it sounds ridiculous to people, but I genuinely believed that all I could do was fly planes. Genuinely believed that was my only skill set for the world, and I couldn't do anything else apart from that. And it was a really dark time, despite being surrounded by wonderful people, all these wonderful people that cared for me and showed me love. But actually, it was a really lonely place. Yeah, so that went on, but then lots of things happened, and it was the fact that someone reached into my world. So often we hear of people, and I see all these wonderful podcasts and these LinkedIn profile posts and things that basically say, oh, hey, my door's always open. Come and find me when you need me. And I don't think that works. So my approach is completely different. My approach is we need to empower people to have the confidence to get through their own barriers. It's not the people that are struggling with poor mental health and mental illness. Unfortunately, the stigma is still so big. What we need is people that can get through their own shit and are able to go, you know what, it's just not right. I'm going to get out of my own way and reach into your world. So that is why I don't know if I fit in well in the wellbeing space, because I'm kind of think I'm a bit of an outsider in that way. Sorry, I've already digressed, Matt. You said this would happen, yeah, and we'd end up down America. There weren't any aliens involved, but yeah, lots of things happened. And so I trained in a course called Suicide First Aid, which is a bit like physical first aid, but helping someone in the moment. I found doing that course and training as a listener that actually we don't have to fix. No one's broken. Maybe people just get stuck. They get really stuck and they don't know which way to turn. And sometimes that pain is so much that the only way to stop that pain is to end their own life. But what if we could get through our own barriers and reach into someone's world to help them find that hope? And that is kind of the premise of how I do what I do. But the title of your podcast, Dear Work, We Need to Talk, it is that we need to talk. We genuinely do. Because I see so much stuff out there that is so reactive. It's so reactive rather than preventative. And I work with an employee assistance program where we know the uptake is low, and it's like, well, when someone joins a company and they get all these benefits, you get private medical care and you get an employee assistance program, and here's the telephone number, phone it when you need it. Well, when you join a company, there's such a high. Maybe you've got a job, you feel valued, you feel worth something, and you're like, well, I'm never going to need that. That's never going to happen to me. And then when you need it, well, you're like, well, okay, where's that email of all that information, of all the support I can get? Well, you know who's got it. People team have got it. But what if I now have to email the people team, and then I'm like, oh, well, there's a barrier. I'm now telling them that something's up and I need some support. So there are so many things that I think workplaces seem to be doing on the outside, but for me, we've got to change the way we look at it. So I don't think it's improving. I don't know. What do you think?
There's so many things I want to bring up, but because it was probably the most recent thing, and by the way, I don't think I fit typically into the wellbeing world either. So you're not alone there. We can be outsiders together. But something you said towards the end there, I feel is super interesting, and I would like to dig a little deeper into it. When people start a job, they're given these benefits, and these benefits are there from the employer, and they're probably well-intentioned. This is not to throw judgment on the employer. They're given these benefits that potentially could help them if they were going through, a tough time. But they're given to them at a time of happiness, which is really, really fascinating. And it's it's not at that point in time when you've taken the job and you're really excited and, you're behind, the company's purpose, and you're like, all right, let's get started. Like, I've got so much purpose in my life now. It's like a new beginning. You're not thinking about, these things. They'll be like, we've got an EAP if you're struggling financially, and you're like, well, I just took a job, so I'm not going to be struggling financially. And it's, here's a meditation app if you're struggling, and you're like, I'm pretty happy. I don't need it. So what's the solution here?
No, don't ask me that. I mean, come on. What is the solution?
No, you can put it on, the poster and coasters, like you said, but I don't think that's a solution either.
I don't.
It's a really interesting one that I've not really thought a huge amount about, but it's a real problem. Like, it honestly is a real problem. And whether you meant to sort of bring that up and it's something you've thought about a lot, it's a real big problem.
No, I probably haven't. But no, I have. I mean, I have thought about it, but for me, it is all about, when you're in that state of well-being where you've just got a new job, you're like, maybe there's relief, maybe there's excitement, maybe there's an anxiousness about those new beginnings, and there is this, and it's like, I'm never going to need that stuff. I'm never going to need that stuff. And maybe it's being positioned in the workplace in the wrong way. Maybe it is being positioned as a reactive. If you're ever struggling, use this, rather than, why should therapy, for example, for people be reactive? Why shouldn't we use it in a preventative state? Why should, when you use the word therapy and you use the word coaching, it's like they're completely different. They're seen in completely different ways. It's just a way of moving through stuff and maybe getting from somewhere to somewhere else, and whatever you want to call it. Therapy for me, for some people, might be going to a football match with some buddies or going to the pub. It doesn't have to be sat there talking one-to-one, bringing up all these things of the past. And I think maybe in the workplace, an EAP is being positioned as this fallback rather than something that we should actively use all the time to keep ourselves well, rather than reactive. I know I'm going to misquote this, but unless you can quote it, Matt, but Desmond Tutu, rather than pulling people out of the river, we should find out why they're falling in the first place. It's like, let's look at it in a different way. For me, my role as an educator is to educate people on the stuff that we've never been taught. I was recently in a school, and it's amazing how things are being so much more progressive than they historically were. If I go into a classroom delivering some of my stuff and I say, all right, who's done some formal mental health training before? Probably 80 or 90% of the young people in that room will go, we now, this is now encompassed into our education. But look at 20, 30 years older, and I go and deliver a course. I'm like, who's ever looked at this in a formal setting? And there's this like, what? No. So for me, there needs to be an educational piece when someone joins a company of the realisticness of work. And you come out of university, you come out of college, you go into your first job, and you have these ideals of what it's going to be like. And then sometimes there's the reality of it. It's like, you're going to spend a third of your life at work. A third of it. So there's got to be a space where you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and you're doing something for me that you enjoy. I've been really lucky. Apart from there was one job wasn't great, but been really lucky to do things that bring me happiness and joy. I think I'm really lucky to have that. I don't think it's always the case, though. I don't know. What about your experiences? Have you ever done a job that you didn't enjoy?
Yeah, I would say like my first job, but I assume that's probably quite common. Everyone's first job is, pretty damn awful. I was washing dishes in a restaurant in Brisbane in Manly, Australia, but it's not quite the Manly you see on the the travel travel posters, the Manly in Sydney. This is the Manly in Brisbane, which is less pretty. Still by the water, but less pretty. It's still quite nice. I'm giving it a injustice there, but the restaurant wasn't so nice, and the owner would yell at me and sit at the end of the bar with his glass of wine and not lift a finger in himself. And your typical just awful hospitality employer. Yeah, it's a story I tell far too often, but like I vowed to never work in hospitality again after that job. I lasted like 3 or 4 weeks and then found my way back and 17 years later, but
still there, yeah. Well, still working in the industry, yeah.
Yeah. But at the very start you touched on something as well, which was quite interesting. You mentioned your identity and how you thought, being a pilot was all you were good at. And I'd like to dig a little deeper on this because there was a study, I believe it was Deloitte. I could be wrong there, but I will.
Always Deloitte, Matt. It's always Deloitte. Anything Deloitte, I quite, yeah. And I was always like, our friends at Deloitte. Well done, Deloitte. They're always doing studies. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Deloitte, for all of your studies. Let's put that out there. But
maybe they can sponsor your podcast. Get them on it, Matt.
I mentioned them enough, but I believe the study showed that, besides friends and family, your work is the biggest, well, it's number 2 influence on your sense of identity behind friends and family. So this is for millennials and Gen Z. I'm not sure I don't think work was too far down on, the older generations, older than millennials. But that must be a pretty common thing then, people feeling like, their work defines them as a person. And that can be a really positive thing if, you're fulfilled and you're doing something you really love. But on the flip side, if it isn't fulfilling and you're identifying your self-worth through this, poor environment and, you feel like you're not valued and you're not making a difference to the world and you are spending that third of your life doing something where you don't feel overly, purposeful or useful or valued. And to be clear, another one of those thirds is sleeping. So, you got a third of stuff, which is your life as well, which can be any 1,000 different things. So, if there is that sense of identity that is driving our happiness in a lot of ways and our self-worth, it's so important that employers start to know this and understand that, the way they approach their relationships with people in the workplace and how they empower and treat people in that third of their life will impact their life outside of work. It's not, like you said at the start, you can't just put it under the carpet and every day come into work smiling, it's a new start. Like that doesn't exist. So there needs to be a shift in how we view work and how we treat people at work. And I know this isn't blanket over every workplace. There are some great workplaces out there and some great bosses, some great managers, and some great people doing great things. But this conversation around how we are at work, I feel needs to be stronger because, like you were, it was a huge impact on your identity.
I always come back to this analogy of, I used to call it the big deep breath, and it would be, 4 or 5 o'clock. It was never that early, before 5 o'clock in the morning. You'd be just the depths, the bowels of the airport, about to check in, and you swipe past your pass, and you go through security, and you're there in your uniform. You're wearing your uniform. There is your identity, already identifiable by your uniform. Your position in the world, and it would just be this idea of go downstairs and having 4 children was our choice and we're very lucky to have them, but they come with that thing that makes up part of my identity as a dad and as a father, and the sleepless nights and child vomiting on your face and all of those things. But I remember going into work, having had a bit of a sleepless night and going down into the depths of the airport, about to walk into our crew room and putting in the numbers, for the code, and having to do this that, that big deep breath before someone walks through that revolving door into the workplace or clicks onto Teams at 9 o'clock is like, we shouldn't be able to do that. We should be able to walk through that door and not have to go, right, I need to be someone else now, because that takes energy. And it's like this emotional sort of mask and the identity of someone that in their workplace, the reason they've got that job is because of who they are outside of work as well. So let's kind of nurture that. For me, like, the performance of an organization comes down to the unique state of everyone's well-being and your state of mind when you come in through that door. If you're not well, you don't get good behaviors from someone. And when we not get good behaviors, we don't get individual performance and then team performance and the ultimate success of that bottom line. So let's not try and bury that. If someone comes into work and they've only got 60% in their tank, that is their 100% for that day. We can't go, oh, you've got to give me more, because they haven't got it. And I think workplaces, they go, well, you are this thing and we need you to do this and you've got to do the outcome and you need to do everything you can in your ability to do that. And we just might not be able to do that. We can't expect people to be 100% all the time. And asking them to be something they're not, that takes even more energy. I don't know where I've really gone with that, Matt, but that identity piece, I think, is so powerful. When we look at females and males and that I think men's mental health, for example, is much more, there is so much, not much more about identity, but it goes back to that social construct that the female was originally in the cave, the tend and befriend, and the male, because it was physically stronger, became the hunter-gatherer, the provider, and had to have some sort of status within the group, the perceived, because of the physical strength, that perceived leader of the group. And I think identity for men can be a really powerful factor. That feeling that need to feel fulfilled in things that we do. And if we don't, it causes us a bit of distress, a bit of pain. I don't know.
It's very true. And I think that sort of feeling like you're not fulfilling that role is a huge factor in men's mental health. And, we sometimes are not the best as men to tell our friends. It's like, man, you're doing such a good job. Like, things aren't, the things you're thinking about right now, potentially it's a dollar figure on what they're earning, or, there are different metrics that you can measure these things by. Just last night, one of my friends, at the end of our call, we try to do a regular call back with Australia, and at the end, he was just like, man, like, you're doing such inspiring stuff. Like, it's so cool. As you're also self-employed. December's not typically the most active month for clients. So, there can, alongside the holiday period, be this sense of, oh no, what am I going to do? You make a podcast. That's what you do. But, that belief is like, man, you're doing such a good job, and we as men probably need to do that a little bit more. And I don't really have much more to say there, but you mentioned.
I get that. I think we don't champion our mates enough. We normally take the piss out of them because that's what we do. And what was it like for you to hear that from a friend, rather than someone else going, oh, you're doing a really good job. You're doing a really good job, which is what I often hear. What's it like from someone, not a potential client? What was that like to hear that?
It's lovely. It's great. And, you wake up and you're like, I am doing a good job. At the time, like, I've got that probably terrible personal habit of just being like, yeah, I'm trying. Like, I always sort of downplay things in the moment, and that's a habit I probably need to work on a little bit more. But it's, you wake up and you're like, yeah, I am doing a good job. I am doing things well, and I am making a difference. Things are sunny. it's actually sunny here in Scotland today. It's really fucking weird. That is the first time someone's sworn on my podcast, and it was me. I'm glad it was me.
No, I did it earlier. I got there before you, and then I dropped a bomb there. But yeah, and I get it. It is sunny.
Yours out.
I don't know. I want it in, but we do like. I think as men, we don't tend to back ourselves, or if we see that in someone else, we don't like. Well, personally, I'm like, like in the flight
there's always
deck,
a next step. There's always I got here, but what's next?
Yeah. And again, that comes that sense of that need for fulfillment and whatever that means, rather than just being happy on the journey. And I know that sounds cliche. It's always like, well, I will be happy when I have this, or I'll be happy when I have this outcome, or the next thing, or the next thing. I think that is, it's like constantly chasing, and that's knackering. It's all right. Like this morning, you say sunny. Yeah, absolutely. I looked up, this is my bedroom, my window this morning, and I'm not going to pretend I get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and do yoga and stuff. I don't, but we got out of bed, and the most beautiful sunrise. We're under the same sky in Edinburgh, and it was the most beautiful sunrise. And I went down to the kids, and I was like, look at this. It's like, it's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
And we can celebrate the little things, like waking up each day. And just as simple, life's all right.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to always be the next thing.
Those small things can be so powerful. Like I'm a introvert, and when I do big events, it's kind of like afterwards I'm a little bit fried. I'm a little bit burnt out, and I've this is going back to maybe I'm not the greatest well-being guy. Like I will often, after an event, go and have a beer by myself. It would be a coffee if events were at 6 a.m. in the morning, but typically they're in the afternoon, and you finish at like 5 p.m. So not having a coffee at that point in time, but like just find a quiet space by myself and just hang out, just think and write and be in my own space and be like, yeah, that did go well, rather than sort of dwell on it and think about it and just move on to the next thing. It's like, I need to enjoy this and remember the feeling of, being on stage. And, if something didn't go great, then write it down and then learn and move on for the next time. But like for me, when I first started giving talks or workshops, I would just finish and jump on to the next thing and be like, all right, yeah, cool. That's done. I've done the prep work. I've done the events. We've finished that. And now what's next? And now, it's taking that time afterwards to just sit and reflect and enjoy it. And, I probably could do it without the beer, but at the same time, why not?
Why not?
Why not? You touched on something before that I want to jump back to quickly. I know we're already at half an hour. Time flies. So you touched on, sometimes people are just at 60%. And, for them that day, that is their 100%. It makes me think of the Brené Brown. She's got an example of a relationship. A relationship's never 50-50. It's always, sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes it's 70-30, like understanding where you are as a couple is like super important. And I think that's very transferable in the workplace, like understanding where you are as a team and like where the sum of all of your parts add up. But it's quite an interesting one with, the technology taking, more and more of a role in the workplace and, being able to track things and, you can see how often people are moving their mouse, and I think that's terrifying. And I don't, there's mouse trackers and people then try to break the system, and companies measuring, what their employees are doing remotely, which is a whole conversation in itself, little trust on both sides. And anyway, how do we recognize and, cater for someone having 60% some days when everyone's expected to be the 100%? I know that's another big question thrown at you, but it is the reality of the world. We're not all 100% at any one time. I don't think anyone's ever 100%.
100%.
So
No, I think
I don't think technology is the answer, like, honestly, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
no, everything I do comes back to that human connection. And, so there are so many lots of wonderful tools out there that, as you say, some of those tools can be really beneficial, to track someone's mood and say, hey, mate, as an AI, I don't think you're in the best of space, and maybe you should take some time away. I think it can be used really beneficially. That 60% thing is like, well, working as a team. If we had spaces, and there's the buzzword of psychological safety, is if we could create spaces, Matt, where someone could come in and sit down and say, look, I've only got 60% of my tank today. And have that bit of, yes, it takes vulnerability, and people go, oh my goodness, I could never share that at work. But it would mean that the other people around them would go, right, I've got that 40%. I need to go and listen to Brené Brown. But I think I know what you're talking about. So in a relationship, if someone if you've only got 60, well, they're going to have to bring the other bit. And what happens if neither of you, what happens if you can't make up the 100%? Well, that is where we got to put a bit of grit in. But what if we could come into a workplace and say, look, I'm not in the best place. I'm functioning. I can do my job, but it's not going to be the best. And it means if you could say that to your teammates, to your manager, to any subordinates, actually that from the top down, and go, look, I've got this going on. I'm here. I can't give as much as I need to. Can you have my back today? So the team, we are social beings. The team goes, yeah, okay, I got you today. I got you for the next week. And it means that when that person, rather than just constantly battering them down to the point of burnout, it means that when they're in a great space, that they are going to do something for the other people around them. I don't know. That's just I like that idea of sharing where you're at, And it takes massive vulnerability. But if we just try and blag it, that's when we end up in a hole, unfortunately. If we just put on this deep breath, hey, everything's all right, everything's amazing, and like even keeping this smile up, it's difficult. I don't know.
It's super, yeah, correct. There's so many powerful things that can come from it as well. Say, like, for example, you used the example there of, when someone is then, maybe they have gone through a tough time and the team's had their back, and now they're feeling closer to that 100%. They're going to have their team's back that next time around, and they're going to feel a part of something. And that's like the positive side of things. But on the other side of it as well, is like, if people are constantly not hitting that 100, or your team's not there, there's data there, and you can be like, all right, what's going wrong here? Or, that's on an organizational level, like, where are the problems? What's causing the stress? What's causing the bottlenecks? But then there's also, all right, like, Matt, I've noticed over the last 2 weeks, like, you've not been, your usual self. You're struggling a little bit. How can I help? Or how can I sort of, lead you, signpost you towards, our benefits, linking it back to the very start of our conversation. Like, it's a powerful tool. Obviously, you need a lot of things done beforehand. You need to develop that culture and the strong team and the leadership. But, in a perfect world, it seems like a system that would absolutely nail it in a workplace. You've got the high performing, empowered team that can cater for everyone's, good days, their bad days, and everything in between. I'll send you the Brené Brown video, but you pretty much nailed it. So you summarized it already, so you probably don't need to see.
I'd like to. I am a big fan of those, but I hadn't heard of that. Yeah, it's like some people like numbers, or we can look at percentages of where you're feeling, where you're at. Maybe don't have the words how you're feeling. It's a big old question for someone. I don't know. I'm feeling a bit rough. What does rough mean? Maybe we can use numbers. Hey, I'm 60% today. We could. I don't know. It's what you say. So one of the things I do is I deliver mental health first aid training, and teaching people how to spot the signs that someone's not themselves, how to hold space for them, and signpost them if they need. And one of the tools that we have is to log reflective notes on those conversations on an app. And what I do is encourage organizations, and it kind of feeds into what you've just said, Matt, is that we've then got data, anonymized data. But if everyone in an organization, all the conversations, supportive conversations are about financial stress, well, maybe there's some data to go back up the chain and say, well, maybe we need to pay some people some more money. Or if everyone is talking about, acute illnesses that they seem to be having, it was like, well, why? Data could be really beneficial for that as well. But mouse movement clicking, that's kind of sent me into a spiral. I'm like, wow. I mean, yeah.
There's like a friend sent me a link, and I'm not going to name the company, but
Deloitte.
scary. Like no, it definitely was not Deloitte. Please do sponsor me. But the company basically they were tracking like movements and tracking productivity, but they were using well-being and engagement as their tagline to businesses. It was scary. They're like, we can tell when someone's not engaged because they're not performing. And I'm just like, it's just scary. Like, this is awful that they're using, well-being and mental health as a selling point to businesses. And they were profitable. They were really profitable. They've been in so many businesses, and that's scary for me in the world of work, that, there are so many reasons why potentially someone is not, at that point in the workplace. Maybe they're not engaged. Tracking their mouse movements is not the answer. And it definitely does not gauge their well-being.
Wow.
But with that, I feel like we could talk for the next.
We do this again. Let's do it again. Well, but do you see next season? Yeah, I'll come back. It's in a different disguise.
Let's do it. But you told me. Well, you said you implied not to ask, but how are you feeling?
How am I feeling? I'm honest. Yeah, I am knackered. 2024 has been. It's been a roller coaster. It's not been as successful as I would like it to have done. I'm always honest about this. I love what I do. I get that from you as well, Matt. You love what you do, but there's parts of running a business that I really struggle with, like the marketing piece and the nitty gritty. I just want to spread a message that it's all right to talk about this stuff. So I'm feeling pretty knackered, but I'm kind of really excited about 2025 because I know what we do makes a difference. I know that happens. I've got the evidence that shows me that, and that for me is like, that's like lighting the rocket fuel, like lighting the touch paper to say, right, just keep going. You might feel like organizations are like, oh well, we don't need suicide prevention training. And I have that experience of organizations saying that to me. And unfortunately, then they come back to me and they go, oh yeah, I wish it wasn't that way. I wish organizations were proactive, preventative. But yeah, I'm knackered, but kind of excited.
Gonna take a page out of my friend's book and let you know, I think what you're doing is amazing and it's making a difference. I was probably having a similar message to him about 2024 being tough, and that's probably where he came from. So what you're doing is great, and it's making a difference, and it's impacting so many people's lives for positive. The rest will take care of itself. So 2025's looking good. But with that, give yourself a plug. How can people reach you? How can they engage in what you're doing? And floor's yours.
Thanks, Matt. I hang out most of my time on LinkedIn because my website currently, I look like Alan Partridge on it, so don't go there. The company's called the Black Box Approach. What I help organizations do is help people understand themselves, how they show up in work. I use lots of tools. I use insights discovery. I then teach people how to maybe get through their own stuff to be able to reach into other people's worlds, help someone that might be struggling. And ultimately, I give them the confidence and knowledge and the skills of how to talk about suicide and ultimately how they could have that power within them to save a life. I am on a mission to try and destigmatize suicide. I can't do it on my own. There are lots of wonderful people that are on the same mission to reduce those number of suicides. And I understand that not everyone's up for it, but I'm just going to keep plodding on doing that. So find me on LinkedIn, Christo Hudson. Christo rhymes with Bisto, is what my kids say, or somewhere at theblackboxapproach.com.
Amazing. Well, until next time, and there will be a next time. Thank you so much, Christo.
Pleasure. It's been really lovely. Thanks, Matt.